Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So my name's Katie and today I'm going to be doing my favourite fantasy / sci-fi series of all time. So yes, so I originally filmed this video, I think the second video I ever posted on my channel, and I just went back and watched a little clip of it just to like see which series I'd mentioned, and it was very cringy. Like the camera angle is horrific. There's like my face and then you can just see the shelves. I mean, you can see the Sanderson shelves, which is cool, which you can't really see now. I've like got a good like amount of body, I feel, on the angle. But yeah, that video is probably not the best. So I wanted to do an updated version. And I feel like some of these series I'm going to mention again because they are my favourite series. But I have a few like updates, I have a few extra series that I've added in, and also a couple of the books I've actually now read more books in the series, so I feel like I have a wider understanding, although I feel like that might only be one series. But anyway, so yeah, so these are my favourite like fantasy series ever, and I feel like everyone should read them. Not just series actually, there's a couple of standalones, but I would recommend all of these. They are my absolute favourites. I mean, obviously they align with like my tastes perfectly, and not everyone has the same taste, so these might not be your favourite books. Okay, we're gonna start with the big daddy. I shouldn't have said that, that was cringy. Okay. And that is the Stormlight Archive, which is my like one of my, yeah, it is like my probably favourite series. Like if I could only reread like one series for the rest of time, it would probably be these. And yeah, so these are by Brandon Sanderson, and I'm gonna put this whole stack down because it's getting a bit ridiculous. Trying to hold that up, it's like posing for a thumbnail. So I'll just hold up the first one because why not? Is this part? Yeah, this is part one. So I have the split editions, so this is like the Way of Kings is split in two, and same with all of them. Although for my Rhythm of War pre-order, which is the fourth book in the series, I think I just got the hardback, so it's going to be big, so we'll see about that. So yeah, so anyway, it is set on the world of Rashar, and we are following three different characters. So main characters, there's an awful lot of characters in this series because it's very much an epic fantasy series, so yes, we have a lot of like POVs and stuff. But the three main characters are Kaladin, Dalinar, and Shallan. No, Kaladin, Dalinar, and Shallan. And so Kaladin is, I would say, the main focus character of the Way of Kings. And at the start of the book, he's kind of a slave, and he is being sold to work on these things called the Shattered Plains, which is where there's a war going on between the humans and these creatures called the Parshendi, who are kind of, they assassinated the king like 5 years ago, and then the two races have been at war ever since. So Kaladin gets sent to these plains, and he is put into these things called bridge crews. So what they do is they like run with a bridge on their heads to help the soldiers like travel across the plains, because the plains are shattered, so they have to like cross the chasms. So yeah, so Kaladin is very much like down on his luck at the start of the book, but watching him like throughout the book become like, he gets involved in this bridge, his bridge crew, Bridge 4, they have such like a found family, and they all really come together, and like Kaladin is such a great kind of leader for them, but also he's very much like taken care of by them, the other members of Bridge 4, and they're just such a precious like community. And yeah, I just love Bridge 4. And then we also following Dalinar, who is a high prince, and he is kind of one of the people like in charge of this war on the Shattered Plains. So you're kind of following Kaladin, who's like at the kind of bottom of the war, and then you're following Dalinar, who's like at the top, and he's very much influencing events. And it was his brother who was assassinated as the king. So now Dalinar is the uncle to the king. And yes, and Dalinar is also getting these strange like visions, which he doesn't really know what's going on there. And then we're also following Shallan, who in this book is quite separate from the main storyline, and she is following around this kind of princess, the brother of the sister of the current king, Jasnah. And Jasnah is very much this like scholar, and Shallan wants to be her ward for reasons which are maybe not entirely benign. And so Shallan goes and becomes this like apprentice to Jasnah. And that's kind of her perspective in this book, I would say, is kind of you're getting more context of like the wider world, and she more becomes like embroiled in the main plots in the later 2 books. So yeah, so they're the characters. And then we're also, there's so much like going on in the world. There's these things called the Knights Radiant, and they've sort of gone missing and no one really knows what happened. They sort of betrayed humanity, and so there's kind of a mystery around that. And then there's these heralds, which are also sort of mysterious, and the magic system is quite like complicated, especially in the first book. You don't know what's going on, but I love trying to like piece together everything. And then there's so much like that you can get. There's like so many little bits of foreshadowing, and there's so many characters to root for. I think that's a huge reason why it's my favourite series, is because of all the characters. I just love them all so much, especially Kaladin and Adolin. Adolin is the son of Dalinar, and he is just the most precious little sunshiny bean. I feel like if you've been on my channel for any length of time, you know who Adolin is, because I talk about him non-stop. But yeah, I love him so much, and just all the characters are so precious. Shallan is a disaster, bless her, but she's so great as well. She's a very like complex female character, which I think is really good to see. And then Jasnar as well is a great character, and also Navani, Jasnar's mother. She's also a fantastic character. She's kind of an older woman, but she's very much like she's quite fiery, but she's quite like a scholar, not a scholar like Jasnar, but like she does a lot of inventions. She's kind of like a engineer type character, and I always love them. For the series, I just love it. So yeah, and I'm so excited for Rhythm of War. Okay, I spent like 5 minutes talking about that. Oops. So I'm going to do all the Sanderson series first because. So then next is Warbreaker, which is currently a standalone, and this is probably my favourite like non-Stormlight Archive Cosmere book. This one we're following 2 sisters, so Ciri and Vivenna. And Ciri gets sold to be like the wife to this god king for father's treaty, because like they're trying to prevent a war. And Ciri is very much like head in the clouds. She just kind of does her own thing, and so she's kind of getting sent to this like court with no preparation or anything, and she has to try and like navigate her way around that and sort of deal with this god king figure who is an excellent trope subversion. And then Vivenna follows Ciri, and she sort of ends up in the city, and she gets sort of embroiled in the like a rebellion that's going on there. And yeah, and she's trying to like almost rescue Ciri, but she has a lot of hoops she has to jump through to get there. And so they're the main 2 characters. And then we're also following 2 other POV characters. So Vasha, who's this like grumpy swordsman, and he has this sword called Nightblood, who Nightblood is just an icon. And Nightblood's this like talking sword. He's so funny. He like is out to destroy evil, and he's a very powerful sword. And so if you're like an person with ill intent, then if you see Nightblood like lying on the ground, then you'll get him and then kill loads of people around you, and then but then Nightblood will like make you die, like infect you. I can't quite remember how it works, but yeah, but Nightblood just has this hilarious personality. And then also Lightsong, who is a god, well, one of the gods from the god court, and he's very much conflicted as to whether he is a god or not. So he's like questioning his own godhood almost. And Lightsong's another hilarious character. And yeah, so this book we're just following all of them, and it's just a great time. And the romance is just so good. And I love Ciri and Vivenna, both of them, especially Ciri. I feel like Vivenna really comes into her own towards the end of the book. And then I think the main reason I like her character is because of a different book, which if you read it you'll know. Yeah, but I love Ciri and Sebron. Yeah, so I'd highly recommend this one. And I think if you're looking for a place to start with the Cosmere, this is a great place, especially if you're kind of into like romance, fantasy romance. I think this is probably the like place I would start. I would also start with Mistborn, but this one I feel like if you've read like, if the kind of books you like to read are like Sarah J Maas or like that kind of thing, and you're wanting to get more into adult fantasy, then Warbreaker would be a great place to start, because I feel like it has sort of similar like vibes to that. I don't know. So yeah, I love Warbreaker. I'm like talking really fast, I feel. Sorry to all the people who played me on 2 times speed. I'm gonna be like 4 times speed. So yeah, so then the final Sanderson series that I'm going to mention is the Mistborn series, and this is the first one, The Final Empire. So I have the fancy like collector's editions, And I feel like Mistborn is like the go-to series for people who are like starting fantasy. So I feel like a lot of people know what it's about. But just in a nutshell, it's kind of this world where people can like consume metals and get powers from them. And then some people can consume one metal and get like one power, and they're called mistings. And then some people can consume like the full range of metals and get all the powers, and they are called Mistborn. And in this one, we're following Vin, who's kind of this like street urchin, and she discovers that she is a Mistborn. So she gets recruited by this other Mistborn called Kelsier, who is kind of has this like gang of criminals. They're not quite criminals, like miscreants. And they're trying to take down this Lord Ruler, who is the like big bad. He's very much like an imposing figure. He's not really a character per se. He's more like this kind of, he's like hovering over them all the time, but we don't really see a lot of him actually in the book. But yeah, so Vin gets recruited by Kelsier and his little gang, and they're trying to take down this Lord Ruler. And then Vin is also Vin has to like infiltrate society, so she sort of gets this other persona, and Villette, and she like goes to these balls, and it's kind of almost like Cinderella. I don't know, it was just so much fun, and this was one of the first like major adult fantasy series that I read, and I really loved it. Just so much going on. I feel like it's quite accessible to beginners, but also there's so much like complex plot going on. I feel like even if you read quite a lot of fantasy, you would still really enjoy it. Especially in the later books, there's a lot of like politics, and in the final book as well, everything comes together so nicely, and little like tiny details from book one really come back and like play a big role. I feel like I really need to reread these books, because I feel like I would get so much more from them a second time. And I remember really loving Vin and Elend, who is another character who's like Vin's love interest. And then later in the series, he has this like where he's the kind of benevolent ruler that kind of foils himself. And I love the kind of incompetent royalty trope. I feel like that's a very specific trope, but I actually really like it. I feel like as well in the Stormlight Archive, Elokar is kind of like that. But yeah. Okay, so then next, this series I feel like has been getting a lot more hype recently, which I was so excited about, because like more fan art coming out and more like people talking about it. And my like January self, who when I first read this series, I feel like no one had read it really. I don't even know where I heard about it, but yeah. So I was just very excited to see more people reading it, and that is Jade City and Jade War. Well, Jade City is the first one, and then Jade War is the sequel. And I just love these books so much. They're kind of like a bit gangstery almost. In fictional city called Janloon. I'd actually forgotten the name, so I had to look it up. But yeah, and it's this world where Jade is this kind of like commodity. So people have Jade, and the Jade gives them powers. And then the more Jade you have, the more kind of power you have. So, and the Jade is controlled by these like clans. And there's, at the moment, like at the start of the book, there's these two main clans that are kind of warring with each other and having like territory disputes. And the main clan we're following is the No Peak clan. So we're following the kind of leader, Lan, and then his brother Hilo, and also their sister, who's come back from kind of, she's been away, so she's kind of coming back into the family, called Shay. And then we're also their cousin, Andon, and he's involved in all this. So they're the four like main characters, and we're really following them and like their kind of their personal struggles, but also their kind of struggles with like ruling the clan. And like there's a lot of drama, like political drama between the clans and about the Jade. And also the kind of the action scenes are so well written, like the martial arty type. Because I think Fondely is an expert in martial arts. I'm not sure which one. I should do my research. But yeah, so they're so well written. And the characters are all so great. Like, especially the character interactions are really well written. So I think Hilo and Shay, they're brother and sister. And their relationship is so fascinating. And also Hilo Andon, because Andon's kind of very much like looking up to Hilo. But Hilo's almost like a corrupting influence. So... but Andon sort of wants to impress him, and it's a very interesting dynamic. And then Lan and Hilo as well, that's interesting as well. And yeah, it's just all very interesting. And they're like, yeah, so the complex like family dynamic and the complex politics, and it's just such a like rich novel. And there's some really like shocking things that happen, and especially Jade War. Jade War will just like break you. Oh, the ending, I can't believe we have to wait till like 2021 for Jade Legacy. Oh. Yeah, so this series is so great, and if you like Six of Crows, that type of thing, I feel like you'll really love this series. Although it's quite different, it's kind of the same like gritty type feeling, and also Lies of Locke Lamora as well. That's kind of same like grungy city vibe. Also, I feel like the most similar thing to this is Peaky Blinders. It has major Peaky Blinders vibes. Yeah, and I also really love the female characters. So Shay, she's such an interesting character, and then also Wen, who I feel like she's Hilo's girlfriend, but she has a bigger role in Jade War, I would say. But I really love her. She's probably like one of my favourite characters. Her and Andon. And then, yeah, okay, I'm not going to talk about that because that's a spoiler, but yeah. Next we have the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers. So actually these books are the Wayfarers, and then To Be Taught of Fortune is a separate like world. But I really love this one. So the novella is just like, it's kind of like space exploration and like ecology in space almost, and it's really good. I really love this one, especially if you like biology type. I feel like this one was so good, and it's just very like contemplative. I feel like all her books are quite contemplative. I don't think that's a real word, but you know, I support made up words on this channel. Okay, so that's that one. And then the Wayfarers series, which the first one is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and then A Closed and Common Orbit, and Record of a Spaceborne Few. So I love this series. So I think The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is my favourite, so I'm just going to talk about this one because this video is getting quite long already. Yes, so I reread this one recently, and actually I'm in the process of, I'm going to be rereading them all and doing like a vlog of rereading one of my favourite series. So yes, and I loved it so much. So we're following this kind of just, it's very like found family crew on this Wayfarer, and there's a new girl who's joining them, Rosemary, and she's just trying to like find a place within the crew, and the crew is going to like on this mission, and it's kind of a long haul trip. So we're just kind of following the crew and their like dynamics as they kind of deal with things that happen along the way, and it's just a very like it's very hopeful novel. Like you kind of have hope in the future of humanity, and just yeah, you just like want what's best for the characters, and it's very kind of heartwarming, and the writing is very beautiful as well. So yeah, this is just like the perfect book to read if you need like a little pick me up, but you also want some like sci-fi goodness. Okay, so the next series I'm going to talk about is the Seven Realms / Shattered Realms series by Cinda Williams-Chimer. So I think Cinda Williams-Chimer is such an underrated author, especially for YA. Maybe her books were popular a while ago, but like nowadays I feel like they should be so much more popular. And they're just so like well written, and they're very like kind of cozy fantasy almost. They feel like very kind of classic, like the world, especially Seven Realms, they're like fells. It's very like mountainous, and we're following Han and Racer, and Racer is like the princess, and she's kind of navigating like court life, and then Han is like this street lord type thing, and he sort of steals cuffs at the beginning of the series. And he has cuffs. He steals this magical amulet at the beginning of the series, and that gets him into trouble because it's this amulet of this like old demon king, and then the wizards are like trying to hunt him down for having the amulet. So yeah, and then they kind of, Han and Racer bump into each other, and then it all kind of kicks off. And yeah, so that's the first series. And then the Shattered Realms series follows the children of characters in the first series, because there's quite a big like cast in both series. So yeah, there's quite a lot of different children from different like characters in the first series, and I love Shattered Realms so much. It's kind of hard to explain what it's about without giving away what Seven Realms is about, but I feel like Shattered Realms expands so much more on the world. Like we start to learn more about this other kind of country, and there's this kind of legacy going on with this. So I'll talk about one of the plot lines from Shattered Realms because it's got nothing to do with Seven Realms, but there's this empress who she kind of is hunting down these people with like mage marks. So some of the characters have these weird mage marks, which is very unusual, and that sort of gives them powers, whereas normally in the world the mage characters, they have like amulets which give them powers, but these people have like things embedded into their skin, and so that's kind of a mystery that's going on. And quite a few of the characters, so the characters, I would say in Shattered Realms there's like two types of characters. There's like children from the first series, or mage marked characters, and then they kind of interact with each other and stuff, and it's just so good. And there's like dragons which aren't in the first series, and yeah, just the kind of interactions between all the different characters, like the friendships, just so good. Like the relationships, some of them are a bit insta-lovey, but it's definitely still worth reading for like the relationships, like platonic relationships, because some of those dynamics are just so good. Yeah, one of my favourite like platonic dynamics in fiction exists in the Shattered Realms series, which if you read it is Destin and Lila. I just love every single one of their interactions. But I also love Destin and Evan, their relationship. They're so cute. I feel like that's the most developed relationship, because the other two are a bit insta-lovey, but I also feel like they kind of develop, they're insta-lovey, but then they get relationship development afterwards. I don't know, but I feel like the books, they're not really relationship focused, it's more like adventure. So yeah, I love them. And then I'll just briefly mention Shadowhunters, which I love Shadowhunters, all of them. I kind of growed up reading them. My favourites are probably Lady Midnight and Chain of Gold. I really love Chain of Gold. I have a ranking Shadowhunters video, which I filmed ages ago, but I feel like I've never posted it, which I'll probably post it at some point. I just love the series, like all the characters, it's so good to like follow them and almost like grow up with them, and just seeing like the new characters and the children of old characters. And I feel like the kind of, no one does like angsty relationships like Cassie Clare, and yeah, I just love following it. I mean, the world is so huge at this point, and I feel like if you're like my age, it's not the kind of series that you'd really like get into for the first time now, but because I have such like emotional investment in it, I just really love it. So yeah, I do feel like the Infernal Devices and Chain of Gold though, they're kind of quite different from the other books. So if you sort of like historical fantasy, you might like those, just those, and then not bother with like the Mortal Instruments. But I also love the Dark Artificers for like the like kind of fae world, which I know not a lot of people like the Dark Artificers. I don't know, I feel like some people do. I really do, but some people hate them, Nicole. But yeah, so, which is perfectly valid if you don't like them, but I love them, so yes. And I'm very excited for the Wicked Powers, which is the final like series coming out, so yes. Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, which I feel like they're very well beloved by BookTube, but I love them. I read them before I ever discovered BookTube, and I just love them so much. And just all the characters kind of like found family, and they're going on like a heist, which is super cool. They're very shiny. I got the collector's editions. Shiny. Yes, so they're just so much fun, and they kind of, I feel like the plots, I really like the plot actually. They're kind of the heist in this one, and then the sort of like city like gangster politics almost in this one, and just the kind of, yeah, the characters and like their struggles, like especially Inej and Kaz and Nina. I just love those characters so much, and I think just the characters are really the highlight of these books. Yeah, watching them grow and watching them kind of learn, and yeah, they're just such great characters and I love them. So yeah, I'm trying to like talk a bit faster because, well, not talk faster because I'm already talking at like the speed of light, but get through them faster because I have a lot of series and that are my favourites. Okay, so then next we have the Poppy War and the Dragon Republic, and this is the second one because I don't actually own the Poppy War. And I just love this series so much. So we're following Rin, who is this, she goes at the start of the Poppy War, she goes to this school called Synegard, and she's kind of like a peasant, and she's in this world where a lot of the people who are going to Synegard are quite rich and powerful. And later in the book, the sort of war starts to happen, and they get sort of involved in the war because Synegard's like this military training academy almost. And then you also have this really interesting magic system in these books, which is kind of, it's like the drugs sort of give you powers almost. Is that right? No, drugs sort of enable access to powers, and I think that's a really interesting topic, especially in the Dragon Republic, how that's explored, and like addiction is very interesting. And I believe they're sort of based historically on the Opium Wars. We're really seeing the kind of like visceral consequences of war and like how it really affects people like personally, especially in the Dragon Republic. I think like the kind of really effects on Rin that you see, and the characters are really like, Rin is just this like disaster child she's so precious, and she makes some very poor choices, but I feel like is kind of, I don't know, it like fits almost. And then Katai, who's just this like precious, really precious character who I would defend him with everything I have. And then Neza, who's like this, I feel like I said that wrong, but he's this like bad boy. He's kind of like Draco Malfoy, but like 100 times better. I think I saw this post once, which was like, Neza is a better Draco Malfoy than Malfoy. And yeah, he's such a interesting character. And then also the City of Brass series, so City of Brass, Kingdom of Copper and Empire of Gold. I love that series so much. Just the kind of magic and the like setting and the characters, and oh, it's just so good. And the audiobooks are fantastic as well. So we're following Nari, who gets taken away to this magical city called Davabad, and the Deva kind of live there, and the Jinn, Deva are a type of Jinn, I think. I might have that the wrong way around. But yeah, she just sort of gets embroiled in all the politics in the city. And we're also following Alizade, who's like the prince character, and he's sort of living in the city, and he's trying to like, I don't even know what he's doing at the first the start of City of Brass. He's another disaster. But yeah, he's trying to like help the poor. Well, there's these things called the Shafi, who are like half Jinn, half human. So he's trying to help them out because he's, yeah, the prince, and he just sort of gets into trouble. And so it's very like complicated politics in this book, and yeah, it's very interesting. And the later books have like one of my favourite villains ever. If you want to see more thoughts on this series and of the final book, Empire of Gold, I have a special like review for that one, so I will leave that linked. But yeah, it's a fantastic series, and I'd highly recommend the audiobooks. Okay, then another sci-fi series is the Red Rising series. So I love this series, especially the audiobooks. Oh, Tim Gerard Reynolds. He's so good. And yeah, so the later books, so Golden Sun, Morning Star and Dark Age, they're my favourites. They're like all-time favourites. And then the other two are like, they're there. But yeah, I love this series. Like, all the characters are so interesting, and it's very like, I love the kind of sci-fi aspects to it. I feel like in the first book you don't get a lot of the sci-fi, but in later books you definitely do. I just really love the characters, especially Mustang, who is like the kind of, I don't really know how to describe her without giving away a load of spoilers. But she's very like a kind of coming into her power as a woman type character. And then Victoria, who's just this like absolute badass. Yeah, I love her so much. And then Sevre, who's just this like feral, complete wild. So yeah, and there's just so much going on in these books, like just everything. So yeah, a recent series that has been added to this list because I recently read the third one, and it just is now like solidified as a favourite series of mine. And that is The Rune of Kings by Jen Lyons, and the sequel, The Name of All Things, and then the third book called The Memory of Souls. And I just love this series so much. It just has so much that I like love, and just the kind of, it's very like, especially the first book, I think a lot of people find it confusing, but I didn't really, because I feel like it just worked in a way that like clicked with my brain. And just the kind of, it's very like convoluted family politics. And the main character, Kieran, he's sort of like a disaster, really. And this books are just like the epitome of like chaotic bisexual. Like pretty much the three main characters are all bisexual, I think. And there's like a poly relationship in the third book, which just made me so excited. Yeah, so these books are really great for representation, and the characters are great. Kieran, who's the main character in this one, he's great. And then Janelle, she's like so fierce, who's the main character in this one. And yeah, there's just a lot going on, and there's these like god type figures who are like, they're like immortal, but they're not quite gods. They're sort of, people worship them as gods, but they're not actually gods, and they have their own like shady agenda. And then the villain is so interesting because he's very much like a kind of villain that you don't really know if you can't really decide if he like you agree with him or not. Kind of like Zahir from Legend of Korra. He's quite like, you sort of find yourself agreeing with him a lot of the time, but then also then he does these like horrible villainous things, and you're like, no, why did I ever like him or whatever. So yeah, he's a very interesting villain. And yeah, I just love this series, and I think A Memory of Souls has been my favourite one so far, just because like all the characters really like come together. Because I would say this book is kind of like Kieran's book, and then this one is almost like a companion because this is like Janelle's book. and then in the third book everything sort of comes together. There's like characters in this one and then characters in this one, and then they all sort of converge in the third one, and it's just so good, and I can't wait for book 4. Oh, yeah, the ending of The Memory of Souls is like, whew. I love this series, and I think more people should read it. Although I feel like, I don't know if it's one which I love but not everyone else would love, but I just really love it. So yeah, I need like memes. I feel like these books are very memeable, like the characters are all like disasters. So yeah, I will say the first book, I think, to make it less confusing for yourself, there's quite a lot of names which all sound very similar. So there is a chart in the back which has like a family tree on, which is quite helpful, although it does spoil one of the characters' parentages, so I wouldn't look at that until you have found that out. But also because there's soul swapping that goes on in this series as well, which gets a bit confusing, because like some characters are different characters but in a body of a different character. That didn't make sense, but you know. So this book also the chart also explains that. And then finally, I just mentioned my favorite middle grade series, and that is Key for the Lost Cities. I just love this series so much. Sophie, the main character, she's she's a great role model, I think, for young people, and so she's kind of really coming into herself throughout the series and like coming into her role as a leader. And so she's an elf, and she didn't know she's an elf, so she grew up in the human world, and then one day she gets like taken into the elven world, and she sort of is at the center of these like conspiracies almost, and like secret societies, there's different things going on, and she's sort of discovering like who she is and her role, like that almost people have chosen for her within the elven society. But she also sort of challenges the elves and like some of their beliefs, and she's like, well, could you be doing this in a better way? And I think that's great. And just the friendships in this series, I think that's the reason I love it so much. There's so many like cute friendships and just like really heartwarming, and it's just the perfect kind of light, fluffy read that you just really care about the characters. And I think it also deals with some quite like deep themes, like grief is quite a main topic, I think, in like the second book, and there's some other dealing with loss and just kind of dealing with responsibility, and it's also the kind of like fluffy like relationship angst. And yeah, it's such a great series, and if you're looking for like a kind of epic-y middle grade series, then I really love that. I mean, it's not the best at like diversity and representation, but I feel like the later books are maybe getting slightly better. I don't know if that's a generous thing, but it's still such a great series and very kind of heartwarming. And yes, so that is this video. This raw footage is 40 minutes long, although there was a chunk of that where I went and talked to my mum for a bit, but it's still quite a long video. So do comment down below and let me know what your favourite series are, and I hope you're all having a great day. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I hope you're all having a great day, and I will see you next time.